I'm also going to haze the eyes in a little bit, just to make them a little bit scarier. Hey, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new here, my name is Leila Ataya and I am a full-time artist. I also run art classes here in my studio, and on YouTube I create relaxing follow-along tutorials where you can learn how to draw, paint, and just unwind and relax. Today's video is a little bit unusual. The reason for this is that this video is a collaboration with another channel, and this other channel is SNES Drunk. They do different game reviews and things like that, so check them out, guys, if this is your thing, if this is what you're interested in. I am meant to do an artwork that is based around the game of Super Castlevania 4. I have never heard of this game, to be honest, myself, so it was quite interesting to do a little bit of research on it and see what it's about. So it's about castles and Dracula and avenging, your family and things like that, which is quite cool, if I do say so myself. So that's it's all based around Dracula and the main character, Simon Belmont, who is slaying the dragons, kind of a thing. In this video I will show you how I came up with the idea for the sketch that is inspired by this game, and as always it's a follow along as well, so you will be able to create a sketch like this yourself. It is predominantly a watercolor tutorial, but it is also a little bit of a mixed media because I did end up using some silver acrylic paint as well, but you can always use watercolor instead if you want to. So without further ado, let's go. It's going to be a usual relaxing art video, but the theme is a little bit unusual. As I said before, it is a collaboration with SNES Drunk channel. So before I start working on my projects where I don't just take something and just draw or paint it in a realistic way, like I usually do for tutorials, because this project demands a little bit of creative thinking. I'm coming up with different ideas and things like that. So when something like this happens, I usually do a little bit of brainstorming, and the bigger the project, of course, the more brainstorming I would do. So for this, so you can see that this is my ideas book, all sorts of different things, and that I like or anything like this I placed in here. And this sheet here, this is what I did when I was brainstorming for this specific game. So I thought of different things, I thought of different characters in there, and at first of course I thought I would do Simon Belmont, but then I changed my mind because it's just all the images that I've seen online would have him as the main character in the posters. So I thought I'd go a little bit of a different route, and especially now, with Halloween coming up, and especially now around Halloween time as well, I thought I'd focus a little bit more on the dark and the scary and the negative. So then I started to look at things like different bits of the story, the castle, blood, Dracula, and I came up with the idea that I'm actually going to paint today. So I will actually use this paper. Now this paper is 300 grams, so it's a reasonably thick paper. If you are following along with this at home, something, it doesn't have to be that thick, but something that's not sort of a photocopy thin. Otherwise, if you are using water mixable stuff, it will rip your paper and make it impossible to work on. And for my first sketch, line sketch, I'm going to use a watercolor pencil, because that way I will be able to get all of my lines dissolved. So I'm using this CASTLEVANIA watercolor pencils. Now I already do have a video on watercolor pencils, which I will link in the corner if you are interested to have a look. So I'm going to do like an outline of a Dracula. I know it's quite hard to see at the moment, but the reason why I have to do this is if I leave really sharp, strong lines, then I might have some problems later on. And on the bottom here, I am going to create this sort of a shape of a bat, because I mean we all know vampires turn into bats. Okay, so this is going to be my outline, and then I am going to create, you know, the picture inside, and the picture inside is going to be the one of the castle, you know, the scary castle and the moon and all that. I will give this Dracula some eyes as well, glowing in the dark. And I will do the castle later. I also am going to create this sort of a chain going around, you know, to symbolize the good guy. So this is the trick of perspective. When things get further away from us, they appear smaller, and when things are closer to us, they appear larger. So this is what you can see is happening here as well. Sometimes it can be called, you know, it's part of aerial perspective. Some people call it foreshortening as well. So it's got different names, but the principle is the same. So this is that end of the metal whip chain with spikes. So now this part is done. So what I'm going to do next, this stuff. Now this is a blocking medium, or whatever you want to call it, masking fluid. It can be called as well, depending which country you're in, depending which brand you're looking at. But what it's going to do is it's going to block all of this stuff, so that when I'm applying water, I don't need to worry and avoid every single little thing. So you give it a good shake, open up the bottle. I'm going to apply it on the areas where I will be painting. This is the kind of a thing that you don't want to leave it on your paper for too long, so don't leave it for more than a couple of days. Now this particular brand, Schmincke, is quite good because it does not affect the paper too much, but there are some that are quite yellow and they can stain the paper too. So now what it's doing is that it's gonna dry and it'll block my paper for me. I'm going to leave that to dry, and then so that'll take maybe about 10-15 minutes, and then I will come back. It took about 20 minutes for it to dry, I think, because I had so much stuff on here. It's all gone very transparent. So what it's going to do is everywhere where I've applied it, it will reserve white paper until the time that I'm ready to remove it and move on with my other things that I want to paint there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to wet the paper, and this is the reason why I said it's good to have a thick paper if you are following along. Anything that would have watercolor on it should definitely be sufficient enough. So now I'm applying water in the areas where I want the paint to run. I have to be careful about the center because I want to keep that white, just plain paper, and then later on I'll be able to add color to it, but for now I want to reserve it. So I'm applying lots of water. If any of you are interested to find out more about watercolor materials and things like that, I will link some videos in the cards and the end screen, so please go and have a look. If you are wanting to learn and practice or get more tips, they will be very helpful, those other videos. So now I've got a lot of water here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start applying watercolor paint, but doing it in quite a rich way. So because I have so much water here, I'm not having too much water on the brush, just mainly the paint, and just letting it run. All over the place. At this stage, you can't really go into detail, so all I'm doing is making sure that the outline is quite crispy. Just a bit of hair texture. So anywhere where the paper is dry, it's going to stop, like see here, it's going to stop paint running, but anywhere where I've got water, I can really go quite strong and just let it bleed. Add some green in there. Some brown on the bottom as well. Now all of this is going to run into each other because all these colors, because it's quite damp. Another thing I want to do here as well, that's to give them ears. And by adding a little bit of extra water, I'm going to create more of these, see, shapes like that. Now I'm going to add a little bit of salt around there. Again, if you are unsure about what salt does to watercolor, I've got videos on that where I talk about different techniques and things like that. Or you can see it here. What it does is that it starts to absorb the water, and then because the water has color, every time it absorbs it, it creates these really beautiful, very strange, unpredictable patterns. And the cool thing about it, of course, is that they're really beautiful and you can't replicate them just by doing everything by hand. But they're also very unpredictable, so every time you apply them onto paper, depending on the humidity, depending on the type of paper or the paint that you use or how much water you've got in there, you're going to create a different pattern every time. So it's always a little bit tricky, it's always a little bit exciting and a lot of fun to do that. While this is drying, I'm not going to touch it, but I am going to work on this part here on the bottom. I'm going to add, the little things that are going to go up to the castle, because I'm going to do the castle against the light of the moon. I'm just adding a little bit of red just to give it a bit more of the scary sort of a blood moon effect, because there are werewolves in there as well, that lady that turns into a werewolf. So I want to have a little bit of that red sort of a haze coming out from behind the castle. So this is what I'm trying to do here. And the rocks for the castle as well. So a bit of brown and black. So at this stage I'm just prepping that hazy wash behind the castle, and more black. Okay, so you can see the salt effect here. Now when it completely dries, I'll be able to remove the salt, and as normal you can paint over it, or you can just leave it as it is. But I quite like, see, at this stage it kind of look like snowflakes, these ones, and they look like sort of stars as well, so it's pretty cool. And now I'm just going to go over some of these darker edges and tidy the edges up a little bit more. So this is not an outline, but more of a just crispening up the edge, because you can imagine when you work with a lot of water, some areas would be just a little bit fluffy. Okay, so now I need to make sure that everything is perfectly dry before I go on to my next step. Okay, so now everything is dry and I have removed the salt, and what I'm going to do is I am going to bring in a little bit of pink as a glow, just I'm going to start sketching the castle. So again, I'm going to use watercolor pencil, but remember, if you're following along and you don't have watercolor pencils, you can always just use your usual graphite pencils. Just make sure you don't press too hard, otherwise the lines will show through. Or you might decide to press quite hard because maybe this is what you want to go for anyways. So I'll just mark the bottom of the castle. Okay, and then some towers here, but I'll leave it to the point where I'm working on the moon. The moon is done. Okay, so now I want to work on the eyes of this of the Dracula. So now what I want to do is I want to remove that layer that I've applied previously. So the best way to do that is to just rub on it with your fingers. Until it all comes off. And it comes off in these little eraser-like bits. And reveals the clean white paper underneath. Make sure that all of it is gone. Otherwise, some areas you will not be able to apply water onto. And now I'm going to start paying attention to the eyes. So for that, I'm going to use a small brush. And I'm going to give them these glowing, bright eyes surrounded by the dark shadow. So I will darken the shadow as well. This is why I needed to remove the salt. Now I'm using the smaller brush as well. If you noticed, the smaller the area you want to work on, the smaller should be your brush. And let's add a little bit of red as well in there to make it extra scary. By the way, the footage that you're seeing popping up now and then of the game, it is this game, the Super CASTLEVANIA. I'm probably saying it wrong because of my accent. It's from the SNES Drunk channel. And now I'm gonna go for the darker red to try and haze it out even more. Bloodthirsty vampire with glowing eyes. And while that is drying, I am going to work on the moon and remove the blocking, the masking fluid from the moon. Okay, so I think now most of it is off. I'm going to apply a little bit of this really bright yellow as a wash. And I'm going to soften the edges a little bit because I do want to make it a little bit more hazy than just a block sort of a circle. And as you probably know by now if you're watching my videos, watercolor never really dries, so at any moment you add water to it, it starts to run. So this is what I'm doing. I'm just using that paint from just outside that circle to soften it up. Apply some of the yellow, some of this bright yellow, a little bit on the outside of it. You just have to be careful. If you've got a lot of blue, that yellow can look very green. So I'm not going to apply too much of it, but just a little bit Oh, especially over the red areas, because then it makes it look a little bit more orangey rather than green. Again, this is all again to create that haziness and bring some of that color into the moon. Now I'm also going to use the fact that I've got a bit of the lighter area here from that salt. I'm gonna add some haziness there too. Now I'm gonna go for the deeper yellow and give it a little bit of that washed out look again. Bring it into the center so that we've got that real sort of a glowing, bright effect. I am also going to add just a tiny little bit of a darker color as a cloud. So this is just a little bit of brown and black that I have mixed on the palette. Remember, the more water you have, the more your paint will run. So you want it to run a little bit, but not too much. So you want it to be damp, but not wet. Okay, so now the eyes are dry, so I'm going to leave them on to dry, and I'm going to go into the eyes, and I am going to create a little bit more shadow. I'm going to use a smaller brush for now, just to be safer. First I'm going to go in with a darker blue, so this is indigo blue, my latest addition to my palette, and a little bit of black, just a tiny bit, so it's like a dark blue. And I am going to create that sort of a evil triangular eyebrow. It's so funny how people in life actually have that, and it doesn't mean that they're evil, it's just how the eyebrows are. I know a lot of really good people who naturally have eyebrows growing like that in a triangular shape, but we're so used to seeing that it's the scary, the evil gaze, blah blah blah. I'm also going to haze the eyes in a little bit, just to make them a little bit scarier, you know, so more glow in the dark kind of a situation, almost animal-like rather than human. I always find it so fascinating, you know, when you hear about all of the fairy tales or the scary tales and things like that, and they actually, so many of them have this natural, you know, story why this happens, like, you know, the cruel king, or, you know, the fact that when people die and they get buried, their nails and hair just keeps growing for another few days. And so of course when these graves get opened up and people see this person is dead, but their nails are long and their hair is long and they're half decomposing, I mean, that's a scary sight, you know. So yeah, that's why vampires have long claws and things like that. If you think about werewolves, for example, you know, it's this person that changes into a wolf after the werewolf gave him a bite. So that's like, there are so many sicknesses that can do that, that are transmitted from wild animals, that actually literally make people look like they're gone crazy. And of course a lot of mental illnesses become more violent, more aggressive, relapse for some reason during the full moon. Hard to say why, perhaps it's the effect on us, you know, or of the moon. on all of us, but it's just, you know, for people who are struggling with specific things can bring in more of that agitation. Also, a lot of killings happen in the full moon as well. Murders. And of course people say that's because, you know, full moon acts like a light, so you can see some murders come out. Yeah, so all sorts of different situations. And then of course all of that gets made into a fairy tale, and you've got your vampires and werewolves and all sorts of stuff. I'm quite liking that effect of painting over these uneven parts, because then they kind of protrude somewhere but not everywhere. Okay, so now that I've got the face, well, not the face but the eyes, so this is quite dry, so now I'm going to go and create the castle. You know how I've started doing this? So now let's have a look. It's really hard to see the actual castle in the game, so I'm going to create this sort of imaginary thing, inspired by what I saw in the game. And I think all the other things I'll just add them in as I'm painting. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go for the really dark colors now, so just black with a bit of that blue indigo, but it will eventually be just all black. This brush is quite small, and it's not specifically designed for watercolor, so it's like watercolor and acrylic, so it doesn't hold that much water, which means I have to constantly go back for more. I'm just going to soften it all here. Make it somewhat ambiguous, because as I said, guys, I'm not really sure. I couldn't see the... You know, the game is quite pixelated, so it's quite hard to see all the shapes in a very sort of a defined way. So I am just going for what I think there is. I saw that there was a big wall in the front with blocks. Or rocks, whatever that was. So at first I'm not going to go too dark, I'm just trying to mark things and see how it might play out, and then I can go in with a darker color. Almost looks like a whole bunch of candles that are dripping wax or something like that. That's what it reminds me of. And that's the thing with watercolor. Sometimes it can take few layers to get it quite dark, because it's not really meant to be used in a very thick way. Usually it's just used for washes and things. It's not very opaque as paint. Okay, so I think that looks scary. And now what I'm going to do is, you know that red glow? I want to have some of that red glow behind the castle as well. So I'm going to get some of that pink, open rosa, that color is called, and a little bit of scarlet red, just to tone down that pinkiness. Add some more red just around the moon. And also I'm going to turn it this way around so that it's, when I'm placing my hand, I'm not placing it on something damp. I'm also going to just very almost like to do this outline again, kind of like to symbolize, you know, the blood and the, you know, the bloodshed and all those things to do with the castle and the vampire himself. If you're not used to working with small brushes like this, then you have two options. Number one, I have a good tutorial that teaches you how to do things like this, so how to create very thin perfect lines. So that's on Patreon, so you can go there and you can support me there and get all the extra videos. You can also do video requests, or what you can do is you can grab a pen and do that with like a pink or red pen as well if you need to. So it's kind of just on the border. I'm kind of with this red, I'm going over the yellow of the moon, and I'm also going over the, oh, this roof is a bit crooked, so I'll fix that up, and also a little bit over the castle as well. Okay, I'm also going to go over this with black now, so another layer. So now I'm just fixing up some of the wonkiness in the roofs of the castle. Always a good idea to turn things upside down. It gives you a fresh perspective onto what you are drawing or painting. Give them very sharp, scary peaks. So again, if you are interested in how to draw and have a steady hand and how to paint little fine details, I have a video on that on my Patreon page, and it doesn't really cost that much. For about $8 a month you will be able to get access to all the extra videos and tutorials and watch them without any ads. You know, I do some relaxing things there and some very interesting tips and things like that for art as well. So if that's what you're into, please make sure you check out the Patreon page. So here's the castle. Now I'm going to use a bigger brush and just bring a little bit more of that darkness. It's like an entrance. Bats. Shall we put some bats and flying around the castle too? Some huge scary bats. Another one up here. And shall we make three bats? Maybe one here. So you definitely want to use a small brush for this. Okay, so now it's time to remove the sticky stuff that's protecting this over here and go for the chain. Actually, before I do that, I'll get a bit more black and put a bit more into the eye sockets just to darken it a little bit more,
just here and here.
Guys, if you are enjoying this video, I would like to let you know about my Patreon page, where for just a few dollars a month you get an access to all the extra videos with different tutorials, in-depth tips, master classes, and so on. So if you are enjoying this, please check it out, because by becoming a patron, not only will you get access to all of these videos and all this footage, but you will also be supporting this channel to create more relaxing videos for you.
And now I am going to remove the sticky stuff. I probably shouldn't have put it here, it doesn't really make much difference on this side. Now this is all off. So first of all, I'm going to go over some of these bits, just to correct it a little bit. Okay, and now I am going to start creating these sort of soft washes. I'm not going to make it too dark because I still want it to stand out. Or should I just make it with go in with a silver paint and just do it with a silver paint? What do you guys think? Yeah, let's do that. Normally I would paint the metal and everything, with applying shadows and highlights and things, but because this is somewhat, I would say, even decorative artwork, well, not decorative but very poster like, what I would like to do is I'll just use silver paint to iridescent paint to create that metallic look, and then I can apply some highlights or other things. So at this stage I'm just applying an undercoat. I really like this paint. It's very strong, and you've got quite a metallic look to it as well. Some paints, they're metallic, but when they dry they kind of look like grey, or if it's gold they would look like just brown of some sort. But this is quite good, this stuff is quite... So this is acrylic, this is not watercolor like the rest of it. The difference between acrylic and watercolor is that watercolor can be rejuvenated with water at any stage, but acrylic color, once it's dry, it's dry. There isn't much you can do about it. I will still add some shadows, I think, on this chain. Okay, so now I've gone over the whole thing, and I am going to leave that to dry. While it is drying, I am going to go over the castle again, just to get it nice and dark. Okay. And then I'm going to go over the chain and just bring out some of the shadows of things as well, almost like give it a little outline or something. Okay, the character, the Dracula in this game reminds me of that character, the Russian character in Russian fairy tales. His name is Kashey, and he lives in this castle. He steals beautiful girls from their boyfriends, their grooms, their princes, whatever you wanna call them, and he's got all the magical things, and he lives in the castle like that, and you can't kill him because his death is inside the chest, and the chest is hanging on this oak tree in this island in the middle of nowhere. And inside that chest, so when you break the chest open, a rabbit that jumps out, and you have to kill the rabbit, and when you kill the rabbit you have to rip it apart. It's very gruesome. You have to rip it apart, then the duck flies out, so you have to kill the duck, rip it apart, and there's, I think, an egg inside the duck or something like that, and then you have to break that egg. Inside the egg there's this needle, and you have to break the needle, and then that creature dies. Not the creature, the character, Kashey, his name is. So yeah, it's quite a story, and it kind of reminds me how, I can't remember if it's in Super Castlevania 4 or 5. There's one of them where he steals the guy's girlfriend, the Simon Belmont's girlfriend. So it kind of reminded me of that a bit. Okay, so now that this is kind of dry, I'm going to just give it a little bit more definition. And some shadows. Just a little bit of a shadow. I'm not gonna go too much because I've used silver paint. Okay, so now I'm going to put just a little bit of shadow just here, because it's behind the collar for this guy. And also just a little bit here, because that's also behind the collar. So the ones that are closer in, you can sort of see where they join, and these ones are kind of behind. And we can do a little bit of shading as well for them. So a little bit of shadow on that side, here this side. A bit more over here. Of course, the further away the object is from you, the more likely it is to have a shadow, especially something like this, because I'm not doing a full-on blown 3D thing here because I've used metallic paint. If I wouldn't have used metallic paint, I would have been putting highlights, but I'm not going to put the highlights in, I'll just put some shadows. I won't bother with it in terms of the highlights. And some shadows here on the chain as well. So here it is. It's done, I think. Yeah, I'll just sign it. And that's that.
I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was useful and showed you a different side of perhaps planning your own work rather than just working from a photograph or an object, which can also be very, very useful, you know, if you're into the more of the creative side of things. And as always, big thank you to my wonderful patrons. I hope you guys have a lovely day, and as always, thank you for painting with me.